Welcome back from your spring break. I hope it was a relaxing one. I apologize that this video is a little late. It took me 3 tries to try to get this video to actually work, so I'm hoping that this is actually the last time. So this week you'll notice that we are looking at the Revolutionary War has ended, and now we're seeing that a government has been established, specifically what's known as the Articles of Confederation government. And what we're going to see this week is twofold, that this government is going to fail because it doesn't have enough teeth to it, and that the failure of this government to sort of provide any type of support to the American government leads to the formation of the United States Constitution. So this is kind of an interesting week because we get to see the failure of one government and the enactment of another government, which we continue to have this government that was enacted in 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So you'll watch this week's video. Please read chapters 6 and 7 from the Foner book. I have these lectures from Joanne Freeman, so take a click on those. And you'll need to watch these to do your week 4 discussion. So week 4 discussion is looking like this, and thank you. Someone's already participated because this video is not as early as I had hoped it would be. So after watching the Freeman lectures, I would like you to try to connect something that you hear from that with one of the documents in the Revolutionary Documents, and I will explain those in just a minute. So you'll watch the Freeman lectures and then you'll read these Revolutionary Documents. I'm going to explain a few of them because sometimes they can be a little tricky. This one's pretty straightforward. It's Alexander Hamilton, who was an aide to George Washington, will go on to become the first Treasury of the Secretary. In this, he's arguing that there should be black soldiers fighting the American Revolution. So as you're reading that, really sort of zero in on why does he think there should be black soldiers. This is the one that people struggle with quite a bit. In this, slaveholders who are from Amelia County, Virginia, have created this petition that they sent to the government of Virginia. At this time, the government of Virginia was considering allowing slaveholders in Virginia to free their slaves. Now, Virginia was not arguing that there should be an end to slavery. They were simply saying that if a slaveholder wanted to, they should be allowed to free one of their slaves. This specific petition here is a petition from residents of Amelia County, Virginia, who are against that. They do not think that Virginia should allow for slaves to be freed. So keep that in mind as you read this document. This is from Prince Hall from Massachusetts, who's arguing the opposite of the Amelia County petition. He would like to see slavery ended. These two are two of my favorite documents, Pennsylvania's Act for Gradual Abolition and then New York's Act for Gradual Abolition. These are two laws that passed, Pennsylvania's in 1780 and New York's in 1799, that began a system of what's known as gradual abolition, meaning that slaves would eventually earn their freedom, but there still would be slavery. So as you read these two documents, tear apart the legal language a little bit to figure out specifically when a slave would be freed. In this, it's right here. It's going to be in that one paragraph. In the Pennsylvania document, it's in here. It's going to be in this paragraph. This is probably one of the most famous letters to ever be written in early American history, and it's Abigail Adams to her husband John Adams. You remember John Adams, who defended the soldiers who fired at the Boston Massacre. And Abigail Adams is kind of letting John know about what life is like in Boston right now, the effects of the war on residents of Boston. But this paragraph here is really what historians and even non-historians like to focus on, in which she calls out John and says, "You are making new laws. Please make sure that women have a say in this government." I've included the next document because it's John Adams writing to a friend of his, and you can sort of see the influence of his wife. He doesn't actually support her ideas, but you can kind of see how she has changed his thinking a little bit. So as you read that document, consider what Abigail has written to him and how he's processing Abigail's letter to him. This is another one that sometimes can confuse people a little bit. It's about who could vote in New Jersey. And when people read this, they say, oh, this is really good because it let people who didn't have as much money vote. That is correct. But this is really what we're looking at here. It says all free inhabitants. Because of the sort of unspecificity of this law, for a short period of time in New Jersey, women who met these requirements were allowed to vote. And so that's why this one is specifically important, because for a short period of time, and sort of accidentally, women had the right to vote in New Jersey. When people talk about people being able to vote and not necessarily having as much money and not having to meet all those requirements, this is the document to consider, because this begins to open up voting rights, specifically in New Jersey, for more people. Noah Webster might sound familiar to you because he is the one who is the beginner of the Webster Dictionary. He's the one who catalogs the English language in America. And in this, he is advocating that all Americans, no matter how much money he has, be given an education. And you'll notice that I said he, because as Noah Webster is advocating for all American children to have an education, he's arguing that all American boys. He's not considering women at this time. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind. And then the last one is another interesting letter that always seems to have popularity among people. And this is a letter that George Washington writes to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island. And if this doesn't sound specifically, if this doesn't ring a bell to you, the Hebrew congregation essentially means a synagogue. So George Washington is writing to a Jewish congregation that lives in Newport, Rhode Island. After the Constitution was written, so you can see this is after the Constitution, this congregation wrote a letter to George Washington essentially asking him to clarify this First Amendment and other sort of rights that are coming along. Do they include us? Does religious liberty include Jewish citizens of this country? And this is Washington's response, in which he basically makes the case that religious freedom is for all Americans. The quiz will open Wednesday at noon. And then the last thing is the midterm assignment. So I talked about this in last week's video, but essentially what you're doing, you're looking at major problems of disagreement that arose in both New England and the Chesapeake colonies. Don't just center on one. Make sure you're talking about both. And so when I'm talking about disagreement, I'm thinking about people whose names are Nathaniel Bacon, Anne Hutchinson, Roger Williams, and the like, and what sort of problems of disagreement they brought to the colony. So you're going to want to sort of flesh out the nature of these colonies and be able to compare them, as I have here in the rubric. But the comparison between the colonies should be very little, at most 2 paragraphs. The majority of your paper should be focused on the disagreements that people like Bacon and Hutchinson and Williams brought to these colonies. So to consider those ideas. So as you're writing your paper, please make sure to take a look at this rubric so that you're including everything in that paper. The paper is due April 20th by 11:59 p.m. on Venko. So this is a big week because you have your midterm assignment due this week, and then you have your first writing assignment due next Friday. If you go back to week 3, I have the writing assignment there. So all those documents you're reading this week are going to help you to write this paper. So make sure you do a good reading of those documents. Take some time with them, and that will really help you formulate your paper. So I look forward to seeing what you guys post online. I look forward to reading and interacting with you, and I hope you have a great